I would like you to start telling me a little about yourself, how you found yourself in this position, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit about your family and like the community that you've built with this nonprofit.
Okay. Well, I've been in the field for quite some time. I went to school in England, and I started working at the National Autistic Society there when I was, I think, 16. And so it became my love and my passion from that moment. So I've been in the field working in group homes, creating new programs across countries and different states, and in South Carolina, I really started at a government agency that was working with people with disabilities here, and I've worked for the school district. I created a nonprofit before SOS Care, and we started working in the community with people that had the diagnosis of autism. And then probably about 12 years ago, SOS Care, which was back then known as SOS Healthcare, I served on the board, and the person that was running it, Dr. Bill Davis, who was the founder, was about to retire and said, I really need you to take my position. And our focus is going to be autism. And so that's sort of how I ended up in this space. I mean, it was just timing of things.
So as you stepped into this leadership position, was that when it expanded further out to include more services than just healthcare?
Well, the leadership position really expanded because I kept growing programs in the nonprofit. And so every year I do a sort of study and evaluation of the community needs, and then re-evaluate the programs really of what we're already providing and where the gaps are. And our nonprofit has grown from, when I first took this sort of seat, I guess, from serving 10 children in an ABA program to serving about 1,500 families every day in a dozen programs. So, my growth, my personal growth really came with having to build a business as we were creating the programs all at the same time.
So describe that to me, because I know my face got really curious for a second. When you were building, what were kind of some of the steps that stood out to you, either professionally or personally, while you were building this nonprofit and this business? Like, how, for someone that might be interested listening to our conversation, how would that be integrated into, the human services field? What's that look like?
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, because I'm a visionary and I've been in the field a very long time, so I knew where I wanted to go. And I'm a program creator, so I am sort of that person, that brain. So I can see a program that needs to happen, and I know how to make it happen. And then the business part of what was happening behind the scenes, I had to find the right people to fill those seats, obviously, to make the business sustainable. And so we've just been developing that over a period of time, to the point now where we have, 60 staff members, and I have an amazing leadership team that even now we're still drilling down on more training and how do we be more sustainable and how do we continue to expand. And so building the leadership piece of what we need to do in a nonprofit is not always something people think about in the nonprofit world, because a lot of people think of nonprofit as, maybe a little more laid back, sort of not so serious about what they're doing. But we're very serious about what we're doing. We want to be leaders in the field and want to make sure we're able to apply for any kind of funding and have events and make sure we're following the governance and the IRS requirements, and, making sure we also have people in roles that best suit their skill set, and so that we can sustain all of the programs as we continue to grow the organization.
The word sustainability is so fleeting sometimes in the nonprofit, just development lingo or conversations in general. And I don't think it's like intentionally taught for that stereotype uh, that nonprofits, they're loosey goosey about the way they do leadership and functionality and purpose. Um, I know that's definitely not true, but was there a point in time where you felt that, okay, you woke up or there was a few months that it kind of revealed to you, like, I think we're sustainable? And,
Mhm.
you know, uh, talk about that. If there is one, if there's not, there's not.
Yes, I mean, I think when you get to the point when you can diversify your funding sources, um, that helps you to become sustainable. So we are able to bill for some services like ABA therapy through Medicaid and other insurance companies. And so that becomes a pretty significant funding stream for a big program. And then, when you start to be able to show that you are financially sound and other people can review your audits and see that you're financially sound, they're more likely to give you opportunities for grant funding. And so then you have another diversified income. And then donors, look at what you're doing in your 990s and tax returns and see, are you sustainable and where are you getting your money from, and are more likely to donate to you when they see you have other sustainable income as well. So it's sort of looking at those different ways to bring funding in to continue your further your mission.
So I want to shift gears a tiny bit and talk about as your SOS Care was expanding and becoming more involved with the community, um, the surrounding community, and then the community of those that you serve. How was the area that the nonprofit sits in, right, and exists in, and creates a world in? How did the surrounding community kind of take that growth? Were they welcoming and embracing? Did you find there are a lot of people who wanted to help and get to know uh, the nonprofit and those that they serve? Or was there any kind of tension or maybe discontent or the opposite spectrum of good in that regard to how your expansion happened into the community?
Well, I think the community's actually been very welcoming of us. We spent a lot of time doing outreach and being present at events in town for all kinds of different things that were happening and sharing information with the community and talking to groups like the Rotary clubs and those kinds of social clubs that are a community, groups that are already doing work. And so, just finding those audiences where you can go and share information and bring people with disabilities with us that maybe they weren't thinking about disability in the way we're presenting it sometimes, because people have a mindset, right, that they already think when you might say the word disability and they don't have experience. So breaking down some of those barriers, I think was really important into being more accepted.
Thinking more about the kind of stereotypical thoughts people might carry or have, whether they're conscious about them or not, about people who have disabilities. Um, you've been doing this for a substantial amount of time, and do you think you can say with any kind of confidence that in that time you have seen a greater acceptance, a more welcoming heart, a genuine curiosity for those who are able-bodied to get to understand and love and accept and create an integrated community with those who are considered disabled? Do you see more of that in the time that you've worked?
I definitely do. Yes, I definitely do. And businesses that are accepting of, hiring people that are talented with disabilities to work in their business locally. And been quite a major breakthrough, I think, of the last few years, that the businesses actually come to us seeking out people with disabilities to help diversify their workforce. And so,
Yeah.
so that tells us a lot about how times have changed. And then I think in some of the other sort of arenas where I see differences, because things like having a golf tournament where we're doing a fundraiser, we would bring people with disabilities to help us present information or make announcements and things like that. And so people that may not normally be touched by someone with a disability, and it's completely sort of, they're just there for the golf maybe and help support a charity, but don't know anything about it. They're going to have some exposure to real people with disabilities while they're there. And that again breaks down sort of some of those barriers where people might have a mindset that changes because now they've met someone that didn't fit that bias they may have had in their mind.
Yeah, I really love what you're describing is that creating an environment for that interaction to occur that is, you know, humilious and actually just genuine. So there isn't room or space for a pre-thought, to
Yes.
come up and interact, and create, an illusion or a precondition. The whole point is to make sure that you are not forced to change your mind or forced to confront something head on right there in your, immediate conscious attention, but to just give the space for that interaction to occur naturally. And I think that's why the community aspect and just the amazing amounts of things that you have done in your work and time. I looked at the history on the website and it was just one thing after another. And what was so tremendous to see is how varied all of the events, but in programs and just over the course of the history of the nonprofit, how that has grown exponentially as well, right? I think more for me, there's the part that really I want to see nonprofits succeed. And so when we come across one that does, I'm just like, okay, what's the blueprint? But the thing is it's different for everyone, right? So,
Yes.
how do you see the future? Do you just keep seeing the nonprofit expanding? And then tell me a little bit more about how those that you serve uh, bring their skills and their uniqueness to the services that you provide.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do see us continually expanding based on how, society changes and new things come up that we hadn't addressed before. I mean, even think of just during COVID, like a completely different thing happened in our lives. And we had
Absolutely.
to think of other ways to be able to work with people, support people, have them engaged. And so I think some of the things we haven't thought of because they just hadn't happened yet. Other things, we have a 10-year plan, we have a big vision. And, that includes, of course, the independent living programs and community and where we fit and how do we keep building that because it's such a huge need for adults across the country.
I would love to touch on that real quick. And that is, identifying that there was the way that kids with disabilities were treated in elementary school, middle school, and high school, and then how we carried those stereotypes of able-bodied students to whatever degree. And then after that, like there's a system, not saying it works or that it's an inclusive one, but the education system has a care track. That's a probably really terrible way of putting it, but correct me in my terminology. On how kids with disabilities are tracked and get through, their education. And as adults, all of us are just thrown out to kind of figure it out. And if not, there's other, trials and tribulations that I'll never experience and will never experience as able-bodied people. Why does that so often get overlooked? Or is it just stops being part of the conversation? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, at school, I think it's so different because we have these very separate tracks of education, and you have people that have, a cognitive IQ of this much, and so they're on this track, and then you have people with the cognitive IQ and ability that's 70 or below, and they're going to be in a different track in a special ed class a lot of times, which might be self-contained. And I don't know, sometimes I look at the differences in these people that have graduated or left school when they're 18 or 21, and a lot of the people that went to the special ed type programs had a lot of life skills kind of training and things like that, but haven't really been out in the world enough to be able to figure out what they want to do as far as employment and that kind of thing. So the transition time at school leaves a lot to be desired. And then for the youngsters that actually did graduate with a regular diploma, they didn't get any time to work on how do I interact in the world? Where's my training for that? They were so busy, getting Carnegie units to graduate that they weren't getting time in sort of life skills programs and social skills programs and things like that, which are actually their biggest deficits for most of them. So when they leave school, we actually end up with them all coming back to the same place, which is a place where I still don't really belong in the world by myself without supports, or I didn't get enough training and supports. And so all of them come back, whether they graduated with a regular diploma or an attendance certificate, and they're all back in our groups, and we start over. And then we fill in all the gaps of the pieces they didn't actually learn while they were in school.
What a beautiful process. There's so many things that are mirrored, at least in our culture, that is this, you are thrown, no matter who you are, into having maybe the credits to get through, but not the, life skills, or maybe you got all the life skills, but you just didn't get to, the best inspiration from your education.
Yeah.
And so that's a shared experience that is not separated by, disability or not, right? In our culture specifically, I understand it does. But to find those bridges that we just kind of don't even think exist, that help us understand someone better. Again, it's an experience that occurs in an environment between, like a natural coming to an understanding between two people, and to explain that to somebody,
yes,
a lot harder. So
yes.
I imagine that there's a lot of richness that I won't say lacks when you do advocacy work or policy work, but that just seems more holistic and more genuine when you can do interactions with communities, compared to trying to get a law passed or trying to explain something to a body or an entity. Can you tell me a little bit more about that experience?
Yes, I mean, as a mom as well of two, young men with autism, I mean, the advocacy piece of what I've had to do for my entire life with them has been things I never thought I would have to do. I mean, having to learn how to stand up and speak in front of politicians and school board members, and be, smart about what you were going to say, and try not to be emotional when you really were emotional, because it's your children and you're fighting for everything you can to get them programs or services and the things that they needed. So I think you'll see that with a lot of families, is that they've learned to become their own attorneys and medical advocates, and things that they never knew they would have to learn, totally outside of most people's realm of sort of knowledge and experience. But we know that when there are so many issues in the community that need attention, we have to advocate very clearly and loudly for our population, because most of our people may not have a voice to be able to even advocate for themselves. So we try to teach them how to do that for the ones that are able. But there are some, quite a few, that are nonverbal that might not be able to advocate for themselves. And so families pick up that piece too, and we do as advocates in our organization. We had some pretty interesting experiences last year with a group of people that are in our adult program, and we took them to Columbia to the State House. and they were advocating for a change. And there's a sub minimum wage law that is on the books right now that affects a lot of people with disabilities being paid at a different rate than other people. And so we took some of our self advocates and they were able to speak in the courthouse. And I think when you watch the person with a disability that's able to actually stand up and present this information, it's so much more powerful than when it comes from, their mom or a person that doesn't have a disability. So they did so much work last year that really helped change legislation. And that was just amazing to watch. I had lots of proud mom moments during those times.
Again, to my point before, like that environment for that change is more organic. I like that word best, probably out of all the words I've been trying to use. There's this like organic process that can be almost impossible to nail. Actually, in my just personal experience, impeccable at getting down or getting across an experience, or to, kind of demand a kindness, like a natural kindness from somebody else, just by explaining to them how they should or should not be interacting with another person or a person with disabilities, or as an able person and as an advocate. And that's what's refreshing as well, to have just hear that kind of theme flow throughout your conversation about your leadership and SOS care. We talked when we last talked. One of the last things we spoke about was a lot of transitioning into living, some of the people that you work with living on their own, right? And that you've seen that process. Can you talk a little bit more about their experience?
Well, I think when we started talking about how we were serving and supporting adults in our nonprofit, we spent so much time on employment and learning life skills and being out in the community and joining recreation groups. And then at the end of the day, everybody, was still going home to their parents' house. And it just became a natural time for us to have this conversation, which is, what are you going to do when your parents don't have a house or your parents are not here anymore? Like, have you thought about those things, and have you talked about those things with your family? And so we started having a lot of discussion about that. And no one's really talked about this because it's a very hard thing to talk about. Oh, my mom won't be here one day. Or, oh, well, I'm just going to live with my sister or my brother, which sounds like a good idea in this moment, maybe. But when they get married and have their own family, maybe they might not want you to come and live in their house with them. And so we started talking about what that looks like. And we brought visuals, and we're like, these are condos and these are houses in the community, and this is a place in a little town, and this is a place in the country. And if we could all sort of pick places that we would want to live and spend time with people that we felt safe with, what does that look like? And so they really came up with the idea that they would like to live in a community together where they felt safe and they could afford. And so that really became the beginning of the dream for and the planning for Oak Tree Farm. And so then I got some professionals together around the table that had experience as builders and real estate people and land developers and engineers. And we really started talking about, is this something we can really do? And of course, my answer is always yes, because we can do anything. So we just started making a plan. And, now we have the first 2 houses built at Oak Tree Farm, and we have 10 acres, and people are living there, and they've been living there for a year. And it has been, it's hard to describe for me the progress that I've seen with the 5 men that are living there. because it's so many things that people have never done before, have these experiences, that it's hard to sort of put it all into words. But not having a staff person that lived there with them all the time was probably the best thing we could have decided. And having them make decisions on their own and as a team or with their roommates help them grow exponentially and gain confidence. Every time they made a decision, gained more confidence and gained more confidence. And they're just amazing people that did this on their own. We gave them a platform, and they just grew into people that are independent. And we didn't know it was going to be that great, but it's been more than I could ever say. And they're so happy. So now we're getting ready to start the next phase of the building, where we move a lot of people at one time. So we actually have 75 people that will move out to Oak Tree Farm this year, which is massive. And I'm sure we'll come with lots of interesting challenges. But we've created some new supports that we saw for things that may be more helpful, with a mental health team that's ready to help with transition for families as well, because the transition isn't just challenging for the person with a disability. The challenge of the transition for the family is huge, because they've had this grown person in their house for their whole life, and they've made decisions for them for most things that they do every day. And so to not be part of that every day for them is a very hard change as well.
I think my mom probably needed a mental health team when I left the nest, because that was the first and the last. But her solution was getting 5 or 6 dogs. Not a way I would suggest in supporting a whole community. Unless everyone wanted a dog, then I actually think that's a great idea. Everyone gets a dog in the community. But tell me, this project, how long has it taken to get this far?
Well, it's been a dream in my head for many, many years. And then to get it from an idea to sort of on paper, to buy in the land, to finding funding, to moving people and all of that, we're probably, I think we're in year 5 of actual
Beautiful
work.
Yeah. At any point in the year so far and the years to come, I'm sure, how did you face and address those feelings of like, if they did happen, so I am assuming, but any kind of feelings of self-doubt or like nervousness the plan was going to go awry? I know you're an idealist, and I love and admire that about you. But at any point, did it just seem like you were tempted to take a step back or change directions? Or were you just pretty certain you had the same vision or power to at least adjust your vision throughout the 5 years so far?
It's been interesting because it's not my forte. I am not a developer, but I have become a developer. And I have had many, many moments of like, oh, wow, this is massive. I cannot really think about it too much because it's so big and it's so risky and it's so many things. And so I would have those moments. And then we had difficult times with some grant funding and some things we didn't understand in applications and things we didn't get money for because we didn't have all of the right, pieces in a grant and things like that. So it's been a massive learning curve. I would say that I knew whatever happened, I was never going to give it up. I mean, it was never, there were many, many times where people were like, wow, this is so big. How are you doing this? I was like, I don't know, but we will. And the people come and they help and we get through the next hurdle and we keep going. And because I have a commitment to the people that I support, I've given them a dream and I have to make it happen. I'm committed to do that no matter what. So yeah, I did have lots of doubt. There were lots of very stressful days and nights and But luckily, I have a great team of people that worked with me, and we got through each piece, and our commitment is steadfast. We're doing it, so whenever that takes.
Going back to your very beginnings, your very, very beginnings, when were working with the disability population, and you would have never even guessed that in the first place. Those who are, either new to the human services field or still searching for their population, quote unquote, what kind of advice do you give them? Is it like a follow your heart kind of advice, or is there something to finding the magic in the people that you really want to serve?
Mm-hmm. And I think I think for a lot of people, it is experience. It's having an experience that you never had before. So I think it's really important to put yourself in places where you're uncomfortable, that you don't know much about, because you don't know the thing that you're looking for sometimes. I didn't know the thing I was looking for. I was put into that place. My professor said, you have to go do this internship. Not what I was expecting or wanted to do at all. But if he hadn't put me in that space, I would never have known this was actually my lifelong work about to happen. And so I think it's important for people with disabilities, people without disabilities, to have experiences where they go to different places, businesses, things that they don't know anything about, join a board of something you don't know anything about, learn new things, because along that journey, you will find something that you didn't even know existed, and it will make your heart sing. And that's what we hope that, all of our work will be for us. You hope that for everyone, that for the amount of time they spend working every day, it's something that makes their heart sing.
And cut scene, man. That was incredible. Oh, just all of that was a flow of amazing energy that plenty of us want to hear as we come into trying to find ourselves and serving others. Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing. I'm excited to have you back on and expand the conversation, especially your effect in the community, you and what you do, and those you work with, your team, right? Proof that, we can't keep living under this idea that we got to do it all by ourselves, and that, hyper individualism is going to save us. And you're just a pearl and an oyster of an example of what that looks like to overcome that, that stipulation.
Nice.
That's a good word for it. All right. Thank y'all for joining this episode, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much.
You can find previous talks on our YouTube page. Just search NOHS Organization and click subscribe. All of our social media handles can be found in the description box below. And of course, there is a ton more to learn and do on our website, nationalhumanservices.org.